You know that feeling when your gut just tells you something? Maybe you meet someone and instantly get a read on them, or you see a headline and boom, opinion formed.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there. It's fascinating because, our minds actually have these two kind of distinct ways of processing information.
Right, like two modes.
Exactly. One's really fast, intuitive, emotional. The other, much slower, more deliberate, logical.
Daniel Kahneman's work, right? Thinking fast and slow.
That's the one. He really brought that framework into focus. And it's crucial for understanding why those gut feelings can sometimes be, a bit unreliable.
Okay, so system one, that's the quick instinctive bit.
Uh-huh. The automatic pilot.
And system two, that's the more analytical, effortful part.
Right. The one that needs you to actually focus.
So in this deep dive, we're going to explore how these two systems work, the mental shortcuts, heuristics,
Right.
right, that we all use without even realizing it.
And some of the predictable biases that can pop up because of them. Yeah.
Think of it like a user manual for your own brain, giving you those aha moments, helping you understand why you think the way you do.
Absolutely. Whether it's a quick judgment or a big, complex problem, understanding this stuff can really give you an edge. It helps you know when to trust that gut feeling and when maybe, just maybe, you need to slow down and think it through.
It's not about ditching intuition altogether, is it?
Not at all. It's more about understanding its limits, knowing when to consciously switch on that more effortful system too, especially now with so much information flying around.
Okay, so let's start with something really practical. Just having a name for these thinking errors can be super
It's
helpful.
definitely like the halo effect.
Ah, yeah. Explain that one.
So imagine you see a speaker who's, I don't know, really good looking, speaks very confidently.
Okay.
System one might just jump straight to thinking, wow, they must be really smart too. Their ideas must be brilliant.
Before you've even really processed what they're saying.
Exactly. That initial positive impression, the halo spreads to influence your judgment of their other qualities.
So giving it that label, halo effect, helps you notice it.
Precisely. It's like having a flag. You see someone being maybe overly impressed by one good trait, and you think, hang on, could this be the halo effect? That awareness is the first step.
It's like a mental shortcut to understanding these patterns in our thinking.
Yeah, a shortcut to spotting other shortcuts.
Speaking of shortcuts, our brains love them. And one really common one is the availability heuristic.
Right, this is all about how easily examples come to mind.
So if something pops into your head easily, you assume it's more common or likely.
That's the gist of it. But, and here's the catch, does what comes to mind easily always reflect reality?
Probably not, I'm guessing.
Often, no. Think about that study with the letter K. People were asked if K appears more often as the first letter or the third letter in English words.
Okay, so words starting with K. Kitchen, kite, king. Yeah, lots of those come to mind quickly.
Much easier than thinking of words where K is the third letter, right? Like awkward or acknowledge or baker.
True. So most people guess K is more common at the start.
Exactly, but it's actually the other way around. K and lots of other consonants are more frequent in the third position.
Wow. So just because it's easier to recall words starting with K,
Our brain tricks us into thinking it's more frequent. That's the availability heuristic in action. It feels right, but it's a predictable error based on ease of recall.
that makes me think. I used to have this idea that infidelity was way more common among politicians.
Okay. Why did you think that?
Well, thinking about it now, it's probably just because when a politician does have an affair, it's massive news, right? It's everywhere.
Ah, perfect example. It's highly available in your memory because of the intense media coverage.
Doesn't mean it happens more often than with, say, plumbers or accountants whose lives aren't under a microscope.
Exactly. Their scandals just aren't as readily available to your mind.
So you really have to question your first impressions. Where did that thought come from? Was it solid evidence or just the loudest story?
And that questioning leads to a deeper understanding, doesn't it? You move past the easy answer.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. What about those aha moments? Expert intuition, like a chess master, seeing a move instantly, or a doctor diagnosing something really fast, seems almost magical.
It does seem like magic sometimes, but Herbert Simon had a great take on this. He basically said, intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition.
Recognition, meaning what?
Meaning these experts, through thousands and thousands of hours of practice, have learned to see patterns that novices just don't. It's not magic, it's deep familiarity.
So the chessboard, or the patient's symptoms, acts like a cue.
And that cue instantly unlocks a huge amount of stored knowledge and experience in their memory. It's pattern recognition just operating at incredibly high speed.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It demystifies it, takes away the magic element.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's a skill built over time, not some innate psychic power. Understanding intuition as recognition can be a real aha moment itself.
Okay, so that's system one doing its thing, often automatically. What about system two? When does that kick in?
System 2 is for the heavy lifting, the effortful mental stuff that doesn't just happen.
Like what?
Like consciously searching your memory for something specific, like where did I leave my keys? Or doing mental math. Or like Kahneman's example, driving on the left side of the road if you're used to the right.
Yeah, that takes constant concentration.
Right. It requires focused attention and deliberate mental effort. It's not automatic. You have to keep working at it.
And you can actually see this effort happening physically,
Yeah.
like with pupils dilating.
It's quite remarkable, yes. Experiments showed that when people were doing demanding mental tasks like remembering a string of numbers or multiplying in their head, their pupils literally got wider.
Whoa, a direct sign of the brain working hard.
Exactly. It's a physical measure of the mental energy being used. And interestingly, the researchers could often tell when someone stopped trying just by seeing their pupils shrink back down.
Like a little window into their mental effort.
It really is. But this intense focus has a downside. Have you heard of the invisible gorilla experiment?
Vaguely. Remind me.
People were asked to watch a video and count how many times players in white shirts passed a basketball.
Okay.
While they were intently focused on counting, a person in a full gorilla suit walked right through the middle of the players, thumped its chest, and walked off.
And people missed it.
A surprisingly large number completely missed the gorilla. They were so focused on the counting task, they became blind to something totally unexpected, even though it was right there. It's called inattentional blindness.
That's incredible. You can literally be looking right at something.
But if your attention is fully engaged elsewhere, you just don't see it.
And there was another study linking effort and awareness with letters and digits.
Yeah, similar idea. People had to hold digits in mind, and sometimes a letter would flash on screen. Their ability to spot the letter was worst when the mental load of the digit task was highest. The pupil dilation matched this pattern to more effort, less awareness of other
So
things.
our attention is like a limited resource.
Exactly. We have a finite budget of mental effort. Understanding that helps you not feel so overwhelmed. You realize you can't possibly pay close attention to everything all at once.
Okay.
It helps manage expectations.
Okay, so what are the specific jobs that only System 2 can handle? Things System 1 just can't do.
Well, System 2 is the only one that can consciously follow rules. Like, okay, ignore the red words, only read the blue ones.
Right, takes deliberate control.
It can also compare things based on multiple features, like choosing between two apartments based on price, location, and size. And it makes deliberate choices between options.
Whereas System 1 is better at simpler stuff.
Yeah, System 1 is great at detecting simple connections, like loud noise means danger, or integrating different bits of info about one thing. But it struggles with handling multiple distinct topics at once, or with purely statistical information.
Like that example of the meek and tidy soul. System 1 jumps to librarian based on the stereotype.
But you need System 2 to step back and think, hang on, how many librarians are there actually compared to, say, farmers? You need System 2 to bring in the base rate.
Right, and System 2 handles task sets too, like telling yourself to count all the letter Fs on a page.
Exactly. That's executive control. You're overriding your normal reading habit and imposing a specific, effortful instruction.
Yeah, we generally try to avoid this kind of effort if we can. The law of least effort.
Absolutely. Our brains are fundamentally geared towards conserving energy. We naturally avoid mental overload. We break down big tasks. We rely on long-term memory, which is vast, instead of overloading our easily taxed working memory. Just efficient.
So the path of least resistance mentally.
Pretty much. And this limited budget of effort, it seems like it's shared across different kinds of voluntary effort.
Meaning cognitive effort, emotional control, physical effort. They all draw from the same pool.
That's the idea behind Roy Baumeister's work on ego depletion.
Right, explain that.
So his experiments showed that if you exert self-control in one area, it makes it harder to exert self-control in a different area shortly after.
Like if you force yourself not to laugh during a funny movie?
You might give up sooner on a difficult puzzle afterwards. Or if you resist eating tempting cookies and eat radishes instead.
your physical stamina might be lower later on.
Exactly. It suggests that self-control across different domains uses up a limited mental resource.
So if you've had a mentally taxing day, it might actually be harder to resist dessert later that evening.
That's the implication. It's a finite resource, so you need to be kind of strategic about how and when you deploy it. Understanding ego depletion helps you plan when to tackle demanding tasks.
Interesting. Now, what about the flip side? Not exerting enough effort, intellectual laziness.
Yeah, that's the tendency to just accept the first plausible answer that comes to mind without really engaging System 2 to check it properly.
We could think harder, but we often just don't.
Exactly. It's often more about a lack of motivation to do the hard thinking than a lack of ability.
Like those riddle questions that have an obvious seeming but wrong answer.
Precisely. The bat and ball problem is a classic. If you don't stop and activate System 2, you'll likely go with the intuitive but incorrect answer.
And Shane Frederick's cognitive reflection test, which uses those kinds of questions, it showed something interesting, right?
Yeah, he found that people who tend to go with the easy, intuitive answer on those tests who score low also tend to be more impulsive in other ways, more impatient, preferring immediate rewards.
So being willing to engage in effortful thinking is linked to other traits.
It seems so. Being aware of that default tendency towards laziness can motivate you to be a bit more skeptical of your initial hunches, more intellectually active.
Okay, let's talk about how ideas connect in our minds. Associative activation.
Right. One idea triggers a whole cascade of related ideas, like ripples spreading out, and a huge amount of this happens totally automatically in System 1.
That vomiting normally occurs example was striking. Even though it's an odd phrase, it instantly brings up related thoughts and feelings about sickness.
And it's effortless, unconscious. We have much less conscious access to how our minds are making these connections than we think.
So this web of associations is constantly active.
And it's constantly being influenced by priming.
Priming. That's when seeing one word makes related words easier to access. Like eat primes you for soup.
Exactly. If you've just seen or heard the word eat, you're slightly faster to recognize or complete the word SOUP. It's a subtle effect, showing how recent experiences shape our thoughts without us realizing it.
All these automatic processes contribute to a feeling of cognitive ease, right? Things just feel smooth.
Think of it like a mental dashboard gauge. Easy means things are going well, no problems detected, System 1 is handling it. Strained means something's tricky, requires more effort, time to call in System 2.
But that feeling of ease isn't always accurate, is it? It can lead to illusions.
Absolutely. Ease doesn't equal truth. Familiarity, for instance, breeds ease, and that can lead to illusions of remembering.
Like the becoming famous overnight study
Hmm.
with the made-up names.
Yeah, you see a name like David Stenbill briefly, a few days later you see it again, it feels familiar.
And you think, oh, he must be famous. Even though the familiarity just comes from seeing it before.
Exactly. You misattribute the feeling of cognitive ease caused by prior exposure to fame.
And repetition makes things feel easier, more familiar, and therefore more true.
That's a well-known effect. Repeat a lie often enough and it starts to feel true simply because it's familiar. Even repeating just part of a statement can make the whole thing seem more plausible. If you can't pinpoint why it feels familiar, ease becomes a proxy for truth.
Wow. So even our mood affects this. Good mood means more reliance on System 1.
Generally, yes. Good mood, intuition, creativity often go hand in hand with a more relaxed System 2. When things feel good, System 2 loosens its grip a bit.
Makes sense, biologically maybe. Good mood signals safety, no need for high alert.
That's the idea. Bad mood, conversely, might signal potential danger, prompting more vigilance, more analytical System 2 thinking. So ease and mood influence each other.
Okay, let's talk about how we establish what's normal. You mentioned norm theory.
Yeah, the idea is that even a single unexpected event can shift our perception of what's normal for a situation.
Like the soup taster example. Someone winces unexpectedly.
And suddenly, if another person coughs slightly, it seems more significant, possibly related to the soup, because that first wince created a new temporary norm of something might be wrong with the soup.
It recalibrates our expectations instantly. And System 1 is also wired to see causes everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. We are causal-seeking machines. We instinctively look for agents, intentions, and reasons behind events.
Like that old film with the moving shapes, the triangles and the circle.
Hyder and Simmel. Yes, it's just geometric shapes moving, but everyone sees a story, a bully, a victim, a hero. We impose intentions and emotions onto them automatically.
We can't help but create causal narratives.
It's deeply ingrained. which is powerful, but also means we might see causes where there are none, just randomness. Recognizing that bias helps us consider statistical explanations too.
What about belief and doubt? How do the two systems handle those?
There's a compelling theory by Daniel Gilbert that suggests belief is the initial automatic operation of System 1. We first accept information as true.
Really? Belief comes first.
According to this view, yes. Doubt is the secondary operation, requiring effort from System 2 to question and unbelieve that initial acceptance.
So System 1 is naturally gullible.
You could put it that way. And Gilbert's research showed that if System 2 is busy or distracted, like trying to hold numbers in memory, people are more likely to accept even nonsensical statements they read as true.
Because System 2 isn't available to do the doubting work.
Exactly. So skepticism requires cognitive effort. And if we're tired or overloaded, System 1's initial acceptance might just stick.
That really highlights the need to actively engage System 2 when evaluating information, doesn't it?
It does, especially being aware of that initial tendency to just believe.
Okay, you mentioned System 1 jumps to conclusions.
Yeah.
And you have that great acronym, WYSIAD.
Yes. What you see is all there is. It's fundamental to understanding System 1.
Meaning it works only with the information it has right in front of it, doesn't consider what's missing.
Precisely. It takes the available information, however limited, and quickly constructs the most coherent story possible from it. It doesn't automatically think, what crucial information might I be lacking here?
That example. Will Mindy be a good leader? She is intelligent and strong. We hear those two good things.
And WYSIAD kicks in. System 1 builds a positive picture based only on that info. It doesn't spontaneously consider, well, is she also cruel or corrupt? It works with what it sees.
And the legal example with David Thornton, hearing only one side of the case.
Even if you know it's only one side, WYSIAD makes that presented evidence feel incredibly compelling. It's hard for System 1 to adequately account for the missing counterarguments.
Like seeing a consultant's report that only highlights successes, or deliberately avoiding news that contradicts our existing beliefs.
All examples of WYSIAD in action. It fosters overconfidence based on limited data. Recognizing it prompts us to ask, okay, what am I not seeing?
Now, System 1 is also making these constant basic assessments, you said, like judging similarity or causality.
Yes, continuously, effortlessly, without intention. And these basic assessments often get substituted for harder questions. That's the core mechanism behind many heuristics.
So if I ask a hard question like, how happy are you with your life? System 1 might substitute an easier one like, how good is my mood right now?
Exactly, that's substitution. Or judging a political candidate's competence based on how strong or trustworthy their face looks, that's substituting a basic assessment of appearance for a complex judgment of competence.
And the mental shotgun effect.
Yeah.
Where answering one question triggers other automatic assessments.
Right. If I ask you to evaluate whether a company is financially sound, System 1 might automatically assess how much you like their products, even if that wasn't the question. It computes more than necessary.
And these basic assessments are happening all the time, underpinning language perception.
Yes. Even assessing averages or prototypes, like quickly guessing the average lengths of lines you see, System 1 does that automatically.
And the effect heuristic fits here too. Our feelings dictating our beliefs.
Definitely. If you like something, positive affect, you're more likely to believe its benefits are high and its risks are low, and vice versa if you dislike it. Feelings substitute for analysis.
Okay, let's dive into a few more specific biases. The law of small numbers. Believing small samples are highly representative.
Yes, it's a profound error in our intuition. We expect patterns in small samples to mirror the underlying population far more than they actually do. Our minds crave causes and resist the idea of random fluctuation, especially in small data sets.
Like flipping a coin 6 times and getting all heads. We think that's incredibly unlikely, way less likely than getting 3 heads and 3 tails, even though any specific sequence is equally probable.
Exactly. We impose patterns onto randomness. This affects how we evaluate real-world things too, judging a fund manager on one great year, or a CEO on a short-term success streak. We're too quick to attribute skill or cause when it might just be luck within a small sample.
Right, and then there's anchoring. Being stuck on an initial number.
Hugely powerful effect. If you're exposed to a number, even a completely random, irrelevant one, it can significantly pull your subsequent estimates towards it.
The experiment with the Wheel of Fortune spinning a random number and then asking about African nations in the UN.
Classic example. People who spun a high number gave much higher estimates of the percentage than people who spun a low number. The random number acted as an anchor.
And this happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like a house is asking price anchoring negotiation, or even hearing a high number for Gandhi's age at death, making you guess higher.
Absolutely. The anchor works like a suggestion, a form of priming. It makes information consistent with the anchor more accessible in your mind.
Okay, let's link back to availability and risk perception.
Yeah.
How does what comes to mind easily affect how worried we are?
Massively. Risks that are easily recalled perhaps because they're recent, vivid, or heavily covered by the media tend to be overestimated. Think plane crashes versus car crashes.
Plane crashes get huge coverage, feel scarier, so we might worry more, even though statistically, driving is riskier.
Exactly. Research on causes of death shows people overestimate dramatic risks like accidents or homicide and underestimate less sensational ones like diabetes or stomach cancer, often due to availability bias driven by media.
And this can lead to availability cascades.
Right, where a media report sparks public panic, which leads to more media coverage, increasing the availability of the fear, putting pressure on authorities. It becomes a self-feeding cycle.
Like the Alar scare with apples, or Love Canal. Minor risks potentially blown way out of proportion due to this cascade effect.
Those are often cited as examples. It highlights the gap that can exist between public perception of risk, driven by availability and emotion, and expert assessment based on statistics. Managing risk involves navigating both.
Okay, another major one. Representativeness. Judging based on stereotypes?
Yes, judging the probability that something belongs to a category based on how much it resembles or is representative of the stereotype of that category.
Like the Steve description, shy, withdrawn, likes order. We immediately think librarian.
Even though statistically there are vastly more farmers or salespeople, the description is highly representative of the librarian stereotype, so we overweight that resemblance and ignore the underlying statistics, the base rates. That's base rate neglect.
So representativeness overrides probability. The blue cab problem illustrated this too.
Perfectly. You have an accident, 85% of cabs are green, 15% are blue. An eyewitness says the cab was blue, but the witness isn't perfectly reliable.
Most people focus on the eyewitness testimony, right?
Mhm.
Even if unreliable.
Yes, they neglect the crucial base rate that blue cabs are rare to begin with. The specific, individuating information from the witness, even if flawed, feels more compelling than the general statistical fact.
Unless the base rate feels causally relevant. Like if you said blue cab drivers are known to be reckless.
Exactly. If the base rate tells a causal story, we're much better at integrating it. But purely statistical base rates often get ignored in favor of representative details.
And the famous Linda problem. The bank teller who sounds like a feminist.
Ah, Linda. Described as outspoken, concerned with social justice, then asked, is it more likely she's a bank teller or a bank teller and active in the feminist movement?
The description is so representative of a feminist stereotype.
That many people say feminist bank teller is more likely, which is logically impossible. A subset, feminist bank teller, cannot be more probable than the larger set, bank teller.
That's the conjunction fallacy,
Yeah,
caused by representativeness overriding logic.
precisely. Even when both options are there, the resemblance is so strong, intuition overrides the basic rule of probability. It's a powerful demonstration of System 1 thinking.
Okay, let's move to regression to the mean. The flight instructor story is a good starting point.
Right. The instructor noticed that when he praised pilots for exceptionally smooth landings, they often did worse the next time. And when he yelled at them for bad landings, they often did better.
So he concluded punishment works better than praise.
Exactly. But he was wrong. He was observing regression to the mean, meaning performance naturally fluctuates. An exceptionally good landing is likely partly due to skill, partly due to luck. The next time, the luck factor is likely to be less extreme, so the performance regresses, moves closer to the pilot's average. Same for a bad landing, likely to be followed by one closer to average, regardless of yelling.
It's a statistical tendency, not necessarily caused by the praise or punishment.
Precisely. Whenever there's an element of randomness or luck involved, and the correlation between two measurements isn't perfect, you'll see regression. Extreme results tend to be followed by less extreme results.
Like golf scores. A terrible score one day is likely followed by a better, closer to average score the next, just by chance.
Exactly. It works both ways. A fantastic score is also likely to be followed by a more average one. It's just statistics.
But our intuition doesn't get this. We make predictions that are too extreme. like predicting Julie, the early reader, will have a super high GPA.
Yes, our intuitive predictions based on initial evidence, like early reading, tend to ignore regression. We expect the outcome GPA to be just as extreme as the initial sign. We need to correct for that, make predictions less extreme, closer to the average or baseline.
So making unbiased predictions means adjusting for regression.
Right. Start with the average outcome, consider your evidence, but then moderate your prediction towards the average. You'll be wrong less often, though you might miss predicting some truly exceptional outcomes. Understanding regression helps make more realistic predictions.
Okay, what about hindsight bias, the I knew it all along effect?
Ah, yes. Once an outcome is known, we tend to believe we actually anticipated it or that it was much more predictable than it really seemed beforehand.
Like that survey before Nixon went to China. After the visit was a success, people misremembered their initial predictions, thinking they'd expected success all along.
Exactly. Our memory of our past beliefs gets overwritten by our knowledge of the outcome. It makes it very hard to learn accurately from the past.
And it makes us judge past decisions unfairly, right? Based on the outcome.
Hugely problematic. We judge a decision by whether it turned out well, not by whether it was a reasonable decision based on the information available at the time. Hindsight bias makes outcomes seem inevitable. Recognizing it helps evaluate decisions more fairly.
Okay, and even when we know predictions are iffy, we can still feel really confident. The illusion of validity.
Yes, it's like the Mueller-Lyer optical illusion. The lines are the same length, but they still look different. Similarly, you might know stock picking is mostly luck, but you still feel confident about your specific picks.
Why does this illusion persist so strongly, especially in fields like finance?
Part of it is the narrative fallacy. We create compelling stories about past successes, often ignoring failures or luck, that make us feel we understand cause and effect and therefore can predict the future. This breeds overconfidence.
Despite evidence, like Meal's work showing algorithms often outperform experts.
Exactly. Simple statistical formulas, even just equal weighting schemes, often beat human expert judgment in predicting things from marital stability to medical outcomes.
Like the APGAR score for newborns, a simple, effective algorithm. Or the structured interviews in the Israeli army being better than intuitive assessments.
Right. But it's not that expert intuition is never valuable. Gary Klein's work highlights that in predictable environments where experts get lots of practice and clear feedback, intuition can become highly accurate, like firefighters or chess masters.
So it depends on the domain. Some areas allow for real intuitive expertise, others foster an illusion of it.
That seems to be the case. The danger is the overconfidence, the illusion of validity, particularly among pseudo-experts in less predictable fields. Recognizing this illusion encourages more critical thinking about claims of expertise.
Let's talk about planning, the planning fallacy. We're usually too optimistic.
Almost universally, yes. We tend to underestimate the time, costs, and risks involved in future projects and overestimate the benefits. That curriculum writing anecdote Kahneman shares is a classic example years overdue.
Happens all the time. Why are we so bad at planning?
We focus on the best case scenario, our specific plan, and neglect the statistics of similar projects, the outside view. We don't adequately consider all the things that could go wrong. Plus, sometimes there are motivations to underestimate costs to get approval.
So the remedy is to look at similar past projects. Take that outside view.
That's Bent Flyvberg's recommendation, and it's crucial. Use data from comparable ventures to anchor your forecast. It counteracts the natural inside view optimism.
And this is part of a broader optimistic bias. We just generally see things, including ourselves, too positively.
Yes. Most people think they're better than average drivers. Their marriage won't end in divorce. Their business will succeed. It can be motivating, build resilience.
It also leads to underestimating risks and challenges.
Exactly. A little realism, especially informed by the outside view, is healthy. Being aware of the planning fallacy helps set better expectations.
Okay, shifting towards decisions involving gains and losses. Bernoulli's error and prospect theory. What was Bernoulli's mistake?
He assumed utility satisfaction depends on your absolute level of wealth. More wealth, more utility, but with diminishing returns.
Seems reasonable.
But Kahneman and Tversky realized that's not how people actually think. What matters most is the change in wealth relative to a reference point, gains and losses from where you are now.
So it's not about having $1 million. It's about whether you just gained $100,000 or lost $100,000 to get there.
Precisely. Ignoring the reference point was Bernoulli's error. Prospect theory puts reference points and changes front and center.
And this leads to things like the endowment effect. valuing what we own more.
Exactly. The famous mug study showed people demanded a much higher price to sell a mug they'd just been given than others were willing to pay to buy one. Owning it created a reference point, and giving it up felt like a loss.
Losses loom larger than gains.
That's the core of loss aversion, a key part of prospect theory. The pain of losing $100 feels psychologically stronger than the pleasure of gaining $100.
You see this everywhere, right? Taxi drivers working longer on bad days to avoid the loss of not hitting their target. Golfers trying harder to avoid a bogey loss than to get a birdie gain.
Perfect examples. Loss aversion makes negotiations tough too, especially over shrinking pies because concessions feel disproportionately painful.
And it affects fairness judgments. Cutting pay feels way worse than just not getting a raise.
Absolutely. Even if the dollar amount is the same, framing it as taking something away, a loss, feels much more unfair than simply not giving something extra, a foregone gain. The law often reflects this distinction too. Recognizing loss aversion helps understand strong reactions to perceived losses.
What about small probabilities? We don't handle those rationally either.
Not really. We tend to overweight very small probabilities when making decisions based on description. We pay too much attention to tiny chances of big outcomes, both good and bad.
Like buying lottery tickets,
Yeah,
overweighting tiny chance of huge win, or paying a lot for insurance against rare disasters, overweighting tiny chance of huge loss.
exactly. And the certainty effect is related. We're willing to pay a disproportionate amount to eliminate a small risk entirely compared to just reducing it. Getting from 1% risk to 0% feels much better than getting from 2% to 1%.
This leads to the fourfold pattern. Our risk attitudes flip depending on probability and gain loss.
Right. Prospect theory predicts risk averse for high probability gains, lock it in, and low probability losses, insure against it. But risk seeking for low probability gains, go for the long shot, and high probability losses, gamble to avoid the sure loss.
Explains why defendants might reject a reasonable settlement, sure loss, and risk trial, chance of avoiding loss.
It can. Our minds create vivid scenarios for unlikely events, and the ease of imagining them affects how much weight we give them.
And how information is framed dramatically changes things too. Survival rates versus mortality rates.
Huge effect. Same underlying data, but framing as 90% survival is much more appealing than 10% mortality for a medical procedure. Vividness also matters. Describing risk in frequencies, 10 out of 1,000 people, often has more impact than probabilities, 1% risk. These effects can be exploited. Awareness helps you evaluate information critically.
But wait, sometimes we underweight rare events, especially from experience.
Yes, that's the flip side. If you're deciding based on your own past experience, you might underweight rare events simply because you haven't encountered them often, or maybe ever.
Like Californians getting complacent about earthquakes between major ones. Or bankers before 2008 having no personal experience of a huge financial crisis.
Exactly. If it hasn't happened in your direct experience, its weight in your decisions can drop dramatically, sometimes even to zero. Even after experiencing a rare event, memory biases can lead to underweighting it later.
So description focuses us on rare events, experience makes us underweight them.
It's a complex interaction, but often yes. And even single vivid experiences can outweigh statistical consistency, like preferring the person who was extremely helpful once over the person who is consistently moderately helpful.
Okay, mental accounting. Treating money differently depending on where it comes from or what it's for.
Right. We put money into different mental buckets, and we tend to evaluate decisions within these narrow frames rather than looking at the overall picture.
Like the example of two decisions. One, a sure gain versus a gamble. The other, a sure loss versus a gamble. People choose differently in isolation.
Than if they considered the combined outcome. Taking the less attractive option in both separate problems might actually lead to a better overall result when you combine them, broad framing. But we tend to use narrow framing.
Like Samuelson's colleague, refusing one good bet but willing to take 100 of them.
Classic illustration. Narrow framing makes one bet feel too risky due to loss aversion. Broad framing reveals that aggregating many such favorable bets is highly advantageous. Narrow framing can be costly. Understanding mental accounting helps organize decisions better.
Finally, the two selves. Experiencing self versus remembering self.
Crucial distinction. The experiencing self lives life moment by moment, feeling pleasure and pain. The remembering self tells the story of our life, evaluates experiences afterwards, and makes decisions for the future.
And the remembering self doesn't care much about duration, like in the cold hand experiment.
Oh. Exactly. People remembered the experience based mainly on the peak level of pain and the pain at the very end. The total duration had surprisingly little impact on their memory or their willingness to repeat it. It's duration neglect and the peak end rule.
So the remembering self summarizes experiences based on snapshots, not the whole timeline.
Pretty much. It prefers a shorter, intensely painful experience over a longer, moderately painful one if the shorter one ends slightly better. And this applies to evaluations of whole lives too heavily influenced by peaks and endings.
Which creates a potential conflict. We might choose things that create good memories for the remembering self, even if they aren't the most pleasant for the experiencing self moment to moment.
Precisely. Think about strenuous holidays designed to create great stories afterwards versus relaxing ones focused on present enjoyment.
And income affects these two selves differently too.
Yes, higher income strongly correlates with higher life satisfaction, how the remembering self evaluates life overall. But its effect on experienced well-being, how happy the experiencing self feels day to day, is much weaker, plateauing beyond a certain point.
So money buys life satisfaction more than it buys moment-to-moment happiness.
That seems to be the case. The distinction between the two selves is a real aha moment for understanding well-being and choices.
And the focusing illusion ties into this.
Yeah.
Overestimating the importance of whatever we're thinking about.
Exactly. When you think about how much happier you'd be if you lived in California focusing on climate, you exaggerate the impact climate actually has on overall well-being. People in California aren't actually happier overall than people in the Midwest, despite assumptions about climate.
We focus on one salient difference and neglect all the other factors that are actually more important day to day.
Right. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is when you're thinking about it. That's the focusing illusion. It affects our judgments about life more than our actual experience of life.
Fascinating. It really puts that tension between the experiencing self and the remembering self into perspective.
It does. Making choices that satisfy both is a real challenge.
Wow. This has been an incredible deep dive. So the main takeaway is our minds have these two systems, System 1 and System 2. Intuition is powerful, but also prone to predictable errors and biases.
And understanding these mechanisms, these heuristics and biases, isn't about becoming perfectly rational robots. It's about gaining self-awareness. Knowing when your gut feeling might be reliable and when you probably need to slow down, engage System 2, and think things through more carefully.
It empowers you to be a more critical thinker, make more informed choices.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you listening.
Yep.
Think about a decision you made recently. Can you identify which system, 1 or 2, was mostly driving it? Did you spot any of these heuristics or biases like availability or anchoring or maybe WYSIAD?
How might knowing this stuff influence how you approach decisions in the future? Definitely something to ponder.
And for you, the learner, we really hope this deep dive gave you some valuable insights, maybe some aha moments into how your own mind works without being too overwhelming.
If you want to explore more, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow is the definitive source. But there's so much great work out there on cognitive psychology. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.